All right, so who are we? I am Jenna Barton, and I am the 612 Math Coordinator for Paulding County School District. If you don't know where that is, it's kind of northwest Georgia. Not really metro, not really suburban. It's kind of just like hanging out in the zone between not quite metro and way out in the middle of nowhere. So, and then Sarah Graham is my co-presenter that I'm hoping will be able to get on and join us at some point in this presentation. And she is the K-12 STEM coordinator for Paulding County School District, and she is wonderful. We also co-teach together the Northwest Georgia RESA computer science endorsement, and that's where some of this has come from, because we work with Edublox in that endorsement and have kind of begun to see what a great tool it is. It is a block-based coding tool, and that helps people transition from, I like to think of it as like Scratch Plus, because a lot of our elementary schools start with Scratch. And so Edublox is like a step up from that, because you're not kind of limited with Scratch to the characters and the kind of making an animation almost. It's much more akin to traditional text-based coding like Python or HTML. Those are the two we're going to look at, is Python and HTML. But when we go to Edublox, the website, you'll be able to see that they do have other capabilities as well. And I believe I saw where they are actually developing a JavaScript module as well. So let me get that pulled up. And if you will, I'll put it in the chat as well. Go to edublocks.org. If you go to edublocks.com, that's going to take you to the wrong place. So go to edublocks.org, and let me get that pulled up for you so you can see what I am talking about. Okay. This is a completely free program. I know that's always a good thing to start off with. And you've got just the basic overview here of what it is. Again, it's block-based coding, which I'm kind of assuming most of you are familiar with based on what you guys told me you did in your day-to-day life. And then something that me and Sarah found recently that we really liked is under here, under guides. There are some tutorials for you of how to get started with things. And then there is also, if I go back to the home, oops. This is one thing I don't like about it, is like once you're kind of in, you go away from the thing that started. So it's like I have to go back to the edublocks.org. There is also a curriculum. So if you need some help getting started of teaching it, you can look at these tutorials here or lesson plans that are there. And one thing that we found was these 1, 2, 3 coding cards. So especially if your students are already familiar with Scratch, this kind of shows you the difference between Scratch, Edublox, and Python, and can help kind of bridge that gap for kids who are maybe upper elementary and they've really mastered Scratch and they're ready to go to that next level. Edublox could be a good bridge for them before they get to fully text-based programming. And this just goes through some of the common things you might do in Scratch and how you would do those in Edublox. Okay. And again, I found that, see, under the curriculum, and it has several lessons there for you that you could use to teach Edublox, but at the bottom, there's the 1, 2, 3 coding cards. I will say these lessons are great. They do start off with a lot of like the turtle stuff, which we may or may not get to today. That's the drawing module that you can use. But these are not very integrated with the curriculum. So we're not going to focus on these type of lessons today. We're going to really kind of look at how you could use Edublox in some curricular examples. And yes, I saw that comment and somebody actually did respond. Edublox is free. All right, so let's go back here. Who is it good for? Upper elementary students that have mastered Scratch. I would not probably recommend this for your littles unless they just really have a good mind for it and have kind of gone through scratch and need something else. I would say this is more for upper elementary, middle and high school students, definitely, and anyone learning to code using Python or HTML. The HTML mode is actually very new. So I actually had done this presentation before for a group in our district and they didn't have the HTML then. So I added the HTML in because I know those of you who teach middle school computer science probably teach HTML, depending on which of those courses from the state you're teaching. And so I thought that would be useful for you guys to see. All right, so let's get started computing across the curriculum using Edublocks. So we're going to look at a couple, well, we're probably only going to actually work through one of these fully, but I'm going to talk through a couple curricular examples to kind of get you in the mindset of how I'm thinking about coding across the curriculum in this mindset. So the two examples I have here is math, is it a right triangle, and science DNA sequence. So essentially what I'm thinking of, any standard that you teach or that your core subject teachers teach that is very procedural based, you know, there are steps to it that the students need to remember, is a prime opportunity to have them, instead of just remembering and spitting out, you know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that's how we're going to find out if it's a right triangle. They can code a program that will show them, based on input, whether something is a right triangle or not. So, and then the DNA sequence one, that is, if I don't know how many of y'all remember back in your science days, you've got your DNA sequences like G, C, A, T, and each of those letters pair up with a different letter to make your complementary strands of DNA. Don't worry if you don't remember the exact stuff. We'll talk about that. But we're going to do a couple polls here, because I don't want to waste anyone's time. So the first poll I'm going to ask is, have you used Edublocks before? You don't need to type this in the chat. I'm going to make an actual poll, and we're just going to go with yes or no. We're going to create that poll. So if you're not seeing the poll, it should be where you're chatting. There should be little tabs across the top, and the next one over from chat says polls, and you should be able to click that and then answer whether or not you have used Edublocks before. Okay, it looks like most of you have not used Edublocks before, so I will make sure to kind of go a little slowly about how we drag the blocks over and what each of the blocks does and things like that. But if you've used any block-based coding program before, you are probably well on your way to understanding it. And if you've coded in Python before, you are going to be well on your way to understanding what we're going to do here today. So the next thing is, like I said, we're only going to work through one of these examples just because of time, and I want to get to the HTML as well. So I'm going to give you guys a choice. Would you like to work through the math example or the science example? So I'm adding that poll. Math example or science example? Would you like to see how we were going to make a program to tell us if it's something is a right triangle, or would you like to see the DNA sequence? I should have put a don't care on there, but I didn't. So you got to pick one. All right, it looks like science is edging out math just by a hair. So we're going to go with the science example. And one thing we are going to do for both of these is talk through an Ipo chart. if you haven't used an Ipo chart before, it's just a way of organizing your thinking before you get to coding. And I'm going to pull up just a blank Word document here to help us visualize that. And so again, mini lesson on this DNA stuff is essentially every strand of DNA, and I'm not going to remember what the G, C, A, and T stand for. If any of you guys are science people and do remember what the G, C, A, and T stand for, let us know. Let me know. But each strand of DNA has one of those four elements to it. And in order to match up to another strand of DNA, it needs the opposite one. So if you've got a G, that always pairs up with a C. If you've got a C, it always pairs up with a G. If you've got an A, it always pairs up with a T, and vice versa. So G and C go together, A and T go together. And what we want is for a student to be able to tell us one strand of DNA, and then for our program to output the complementary strand. Okay, that's what we want. So you can either come off mute, or maybe you can. We may have to give you permission to do that. Or you can just type in the chat, what are some things that we're going to need as input, either from the user or just a variable we might need to set up. Yeah, we need to know the DNA strand. So we need to ask the user for a DNA strand. Okay. And then something I like to do when I'm doing an IPO is I like to put in there any coding elements that I am going to know I'm going to use. So I know that if I'm asking the user for something, I'm going to store that in a variable. So I just like to put that there as a little reminder for myself. Is there any other input that we're going to need from the user or to pre-set up? Okay, not seeing anything, but if you think of something, feel free to put it in and we'll go backwards. All right, processing. So once we have a strand, yes, the requirements, yes. Oh, sorry, I don't have those typed. I will type them up. I just said them verbally. So what we want is design a program that asks the user for a DNA strand and then outputs the complementary DNA strand. And then reminder for those of us who are not biology teachers, G and C are always paired, and A and T are always paired. Example, if the input is GCAT, GCCAAT, our output should be CGTA, CGEPA. Does that help? Okay. All right. So what processing? So after we have gotten, and this does not have to be in any formal code, just in human language, tell me if the user puts in something like this, what processing do we need to do to match it up to this? And if you want to say some coding structures you know will be in there, feel free. Okay, we've got to match complements. We could set up a function, if statements, decision structures. I do not teach students typing. Mavis Beacon taught me typing, and it has always just been something I really enjoy. Side note, I don't play any instruments, but I think this is like the closest I get to like playing an instrument, because like I just enjoy the repetition of it and like my fingers knowing where to go. So anyways, I do really enjoy typing. It's a weird enjoyment of mine. Okay, I definitely see some if-then statements. And Tiffany, you mentioned functions. You can do functions in Edublocks, but we're going to just kind of keep it simple for this example and not do functions, but that certainly is a next step you could do. Okay, so we want to match the complements for each letter. So if G, then C. If C, then G. If A, then T. If T, then A. And this here is, again, just my brainstorming document. So I'm not worried about syntax. I'm not worried about whether things are in the best wording. It's just a brainstorming document. Now, you guys properly told me that we're probably going to have some if-then statements here, and I kind of included those there. When I hear something like match the complements for each, what coding structure might that clue me in that I'm going to need to be able to do that? Tiffany says a loop. So I'm going to put a loop there just as a reminder. Okay. And then I'm going to need to output something. So what am I going to output? The matching sequence. And again, I'm just going to remind myself that I'm probably going to need a variable for that. Okay. Let's go over to Edublocks and actually code some of this. Here's my Edublocks tab. There it is. So I'm going back to Edublocks. I have logged in. You don't have to log in to be able to do Edublocks, but you will not be able to save anything unless you are logged in. So I definitely recommend getting logged in so that you can save things. Another feature that's new that I have not had a whole lot of time to explore is classrooms. You can see it's in beta. What this looks like is where you can actually set up a classroom and give students assignments and get them here in your Edublocks, which is a huge benefit over the old system we had where people just had to send us links. So I'm excited to see how that works out. Okay, so I'm just going to go home and I'm going to say get started. And then it's going to give me the choice of what mode I want to code. I'm using Python 3. In a little bit, we'll look at HTML5, but there are some other ones available. And I'm going to call this DNA sequence. Okay, start coding. Now I have a couple of views here that I can do. I have the split view where I'm seeing my blocks in the center and my Python code over here. I have my blocks view where I just wipe out that Python view and nothing shows up. And I have my code view where I'm only seeing the Python. Now, one thing that's important to note here is if let me just drag something over here, print hello world, sure. That will automatically generate some Python because it knows that that's what I want to do, but it does not work the other way. If I start typing over here in the Python section, it does not automatically create the blocks. So it only goes blocks to text, not text to blocks. Okay, just as a FYI. And then when you're ready to run your file, you just click this run button up here. Well, where'd it go? Stop and rerun. Oh, I deleted all of it. Instead of just my addition. Well, that didn't seem to want to work either. Let's refresh and start over. I believe I've messed it up. DNA example. Just going to drag that over here to make sure this is working before yeah, there we are. Hello world. Okay. So let's go back and look at our Ipo chart and figure out where we want to start. So we know we're going to ask the user for a DNA strand. So when we do that, we are going to look under the statements tray, And does anyone see one here that looks like it might be asking a question of the user? Input, yay. Now, something that's important in Edublox is to look at the shape of the block and if it can connect to anything. See, there's no way for this one to connect like a puzzle piece. These kind of pill-shaped ones, those have to go inside some other block. So in this case, I gave myself a reminder that I needed a variable for this. So that's where I'm going to go is I'm going to create a new variable, and we're going to call it user sequence. Okay. And now notice that this block, user sequence, has a little divot there saying that it can connect up to that start code. And it's saying user sequence equals, so what does this variable need to equal? This input. This is another change in the new update. That's, if you've used it before, you maybe had struggled getting your pill blocks to go into where they go. They now have this nice little red dot that like links it up a lot more visually. Okay, so user sequence input, enter your DNA sequence. Now in real coding, I would probably want to use some input validation or some using .upper or .lower, if you're familiar with Python string methods. But for this, just to keep it simple, I'm just going to ask them to only use capital letters. Keeping it simple. Okay. One thing that my students get tripped up about a lot, or my participants, in that is that they don't have to put the quotes, because the quotes are part of the input statement in Edublox. The quotes are automatically there. If you're confused about that, you can always look over at your Python code and make sure that the quotes are there. There are some other situations where you do have to add the quotes in, so you just got to kind of pay attention, for when that you do or do not have to have those quotes. All right, we said that was the only input we needed. So now we are going to look at our processing. We said we wanted to do this. We wanted to look at if the letter is G, then C, if it's C, then G, A, then T, T, then A. And we want to do that for every letter. So we know we're going to use a loop. And then within that loop, we know we're going to have some if statements. So again, over here, I'm going to look at my trays, and I'm going to choose the loops tray. And we're going to choose the for X and Y. Again, you may not be super familiar with Python string methods, but a string is iterable in Python, meaning that you can treat it like you would a list. So I can say for letter in user sequence, meaning that that's going to look at each letter individually in that sequence entered, just as if that user sequence was entered as a list. I can loop through it one letter at a time. Okay. All right. So for each letter in the sequence, I'm going to use my logic. If something, then something goes inside of it. Elif something else. And how many of those are we going to need? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2. Now, I could do an else statement for my last one, G, like C-A-T. I could do an else statement, but what's going to happen if the user enters in Z? And I use an else statement here at the end to catch the T's, and the user actually entered in a Z. It's going to replace it with A, and we don't want that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use an else statement to catch everything else. And we'll talk about how I'm going to handle that in a minute. All right, but let's look at the if trues then. One thing I do like about Edublox is you have a little bit of autonomy of if you want to type something or if you want to grab a block. So I usually prefer typing just because it's a little bit easier for me. So if letter equals G. That to me is simpler, but I also could have come here and gone into, let's see, hold on. I don't do this part very often. Logic here. And I could have grabbed this equal block. And then I could have gone up here into user sequence and plop that in there. I do not have a pill because I didn't set up a variable for letter. So I would still have to type letter here to check each letter in the sequence equaling, well, not equaling user sequence, equal G. So I would still need to type that. Sorry, brain. But I could grab that equal pill if I want. To me, I usually just find it easier to not grab the pill. It's just one more step. Okay. And okay, so if the letter that we're looking at, because remember this for loop is going to go one at a time. If this letter we're looking at is a G, then I want to output instead a C. And remember, when we're talking about my output, I said I was going to need another variable. So I'm going to create a new variable and call it matching sequence. Okay. And so if letter equal G, then I want to add a C to my matching sequence. And what I actually want to do is plus equals. Again, if you're not familiar with Python, what the plus equals does there is it takes whatever the current matching sequence is and adds to it instead of replacing it. An equal sign would just replace it. So it takes the current one and adds something to it. Okay. And we're going to kind of copy this into our other elif blocks here. And then we're going to fix them so that they are the correct letters. And you can copy and paste blocks. You're seeing me do that now. I'm using my keyboard shortcuts to copy and paste those blocks. So G goes with C. C goes with G. A goes with T. I will tell you, I have made a mistake here so that when we run this, it's not going to run. And so you can kind of be thinking about what that mistake might be as we go on. All right. And then the last thing we have is the else. What happens when they put in a Z or something that's not one of these four letters? Okay. I want to tell them that they did it wrong. So I'm going to use a print statement. Actually, here, let me show you because I mentioned it earlier. If I choose this print, the print variable, that's a situation where those quotes are not already there. So if I did end up wanting to print a string, I would have to use those quotes. But there is a print with the quotes already to print that string for me. So just be careful about which print you're choosing. Come on. And so I'm going to print, you entered an incorrect letter, and X will be shown in your sequence. This is just a little bit of error handling so that if they do enter something wrong, they don't get a good letter out, but they have some sort of message there knowing that they did something incorrectly. All right. So I have built my output, but what have I not done yet? I have not actually outputted it. So I have built up my sequence, my matching sequence, but I have not actually printed that sequence. So I'm going to print a statement after my loop because I don't want it to do it every time. I only want it to do once at the end, saying your matching sequence
sources that go with it. And see, she probably didn't
is
any of that.
all right. I am hearing some other noise. Not sure if that's my Sarah getting in or not.
Okay, to the session. Like
I think it is. I'm going to mute her real quick. So Sarah, I think you're in now as Teresa, but I muted you because I was hearing y'all conversing instead of just you. So I think I can unmute you, or you may be able to unmute yourself. Okay, so your matching sequence is, and then we are going to print out the variable. What is the variable name where we had stored our matching sequence? Okay, y'all are saying you see Sarah now. Yay! The variable where we had stored our matching sequence is matching sequence. Now, that time I did go grab the pill of matching sequence from the variable tray, and I just say pill because it's kind of that shape. And that is sometimes good to tell your students to do, because then they won't have any typos of I misspelled the word sequence. So that really can be either way. Okay, I told you earlier that I made a mistake, and so this is not going to run, but I'm going to run it so you see what happens when there is a mistake.
Yes, I'm in as Teresa right now. Sorry, guys, for being so late. And thank you, Jenna, for just jumping right in and getting it all done.
No problem. Thank you, Sarah. Glad you got to join us. So I'm going to enter my DNA sequence, and I'm only using capital letters GCAT, and I have an error. And something that our students do, and I mean this for both our K-12 students and our adult education students, is they see an error and they automatically just exit out and they don't read the error. But I think reading the error code can really help you troubleshoot. So let's read this error code. It's a name error. Name matching sequence is not defined on line 6 in Python. Now, it does give you the lines. So that's where sometimes it's helpful to be able to look here. And it's saying that on line 6, so after it first called matching sequence, it didn't have any idea what that was. It was not defined. So I think Ezra says that he might know the error, and he says we are adding to something that does not exist. Correct. So I use these plus equals to say take whatever's currently in matching sequence and add to it. Oh, I'm sorry, Ezra. I am so sorry. Hey, Ezra can be anyone's name, as I have learned today. So anywho, matching sequence was not defined. And so I'm trying to add to it without it currently existing. So what I need to do is, prior to my for loop where I'm trying to add to this matching sequence, I need to establish what matching sequence is. And I'm just going to make it a blank string by opening and closing some quotation marks. Okay. All right. So now let's run it and see if we have fixed that error. GCAT. My matching sequence is CGTA, which is correct. And I could test it a few more times. Yes, and Tiffany says I did not initialize it. Yes, that is correct. There we go. This time I'm going to put some wrong letters in there so we can see what happens with our error handling there. And it's telling us that we entered an incorrect letter. An X will be shown in your sequence. And then there's our matching sequence. And then Tiffany's asking, did I initialize it as a null value? Yes, I initialized it just as a blank string because I did want it to be a string. I didn't want it to be a, I didn't want to say equals 0 and then Python be thinking it's an integer, because then when I tried to add string values to it, it would get confused. So I did a blank string. I haven't tried null in particular on this. That may work, but sometimes Edublox has almost everything Python does, but there's sometimes weird things that don't quite work right. So we could try it though. I'm always a fan of trying, finding out if things work. Okay, so yeah, the null there is not working. So blank string just by opening and closing some quotation marks. All righty. That took a little bit longer than I was thinking. Probably my fault. I probably talked too much. But do y'all have any questions on that? And do you see how I did a very specific biology example, but anything that's very procedural in nature is just asking to be turned into a problem like this. And so if you're a computer science teacher, talking to your math teachers, your science teachers, those are the ones who have the most procedural things, saying, hey, what are some things you guys are learning in your classroom this week? And can you show me that process? So again, we don't have time to do this one, but the other one that I had is it a right triangle? And so you can ask the students for 3 side lengths of a triangle, and then they can have Python do a squared plus b squared and compare that to c squared. That's the Pythagorean theorem. And see if the two things are equal. If they are, it's a right triangle. If they're not, it is not. And they can output that. So anything that the teachers have that is very procedural in nature, your students in CS could code that. Okay. And Ezra is telling me, oh, Ezra's got a picture now, so I can see her. And she doesn't think null works in Python. So perfect. Okay. The other thing I did want to show y'all, and we're going to kind of do this one very quickly, is the HTML that's added. And so here's just a couple of examples for social studies and ELA. Building a website around a historical event. You know, they can include primary documents that they have found, analysis of that primary document, some what if scenarios, etc. Or for ELA, they could, and I just said argumentative writing, but really you could probably do it with any type of writing. But I think websites in particular lend themselves to argumentative writing because you can include those images, those videos you found, and then do an analysis of that and a call to action with some sort of petition or some sort of vote or something like that. So I think argumentative writing in particular really does lend itself to a website, but you could do a narrative on a website. You could do certainly a explanatory, which I don't think is the right word. ELA people have to tell me what the other one is called that I am not thinking of right now. I emailed my ELA counterpart and said, is it argumentative or persuasive? Which one did the standard say? And she told me argumentative. So I did get that one right. Oh, and I'm going to go ahead and save this just so I have it. And we are going to real quick look at the HTML module. And I'm just going to do a kind of a real basic one. And so if you teach HTML, you likely have told your students a million times it all has to start and end with HTML tags, and everything has to start with the less than, greater than signs, and it needs to end with that / there. So this helps us out because when they drag that on, it already has all of those pieces. And then I can drag in a header. I can drag in the website name, and I'm just going to call this World War II. And then I can drag in a body wrapper. And so then now everything I do can be within that. I can go into the text, and I can grab a heading. And what I love is as soon as I've got that there, it just plops right over in my preview. Just like we saw with the Python, I can switch to block only view. I can switch to code only view, or the split view. What's different here is instead of showing me the HTML by default, it shows me the preview of what's going to render. And if you prefer, you can pop that out so that you have it elsewhere. But I like it here. I like to see those live editings. World War II. Funny. And so I can do that. And then I can drag additional things into my body. Like I can include an image source here. Notice I'm just getting a little broken image because I have not actually got an image up. I'm being bad right now because I am not I am not worried about copyright at this moment. I am just pulling something off of the Google. This is the only problem with pulling something off of the Google is you get a very lengthy URL, but it still works there. And so I have this World War II image. And then, I can do just some text. And then I can do some list for that, ordered or unordered. And then each of my list items. And then these here are your attributes. So the pills that we used for variables in our last thing, those are your attributes. So if you want to change the height, the width, class, any of those things, that is what you would drag into there. For instance, on the image, if I wanted to change the height of it, I could drag this, and this is, because this is so long, I'm going to do it a little bit weird of a way. I'm going to cut that and then go all the way to the end of my very, very long URL, and then I'll paste, oh no, see if I can get it to do here, height, there we go. And I can make that, 245 pixels, great. Delete these. And then again, I can drag in my paragraphs with my reasons. So like I said, very quick, because we're almost out of time. That is just the very basics of that HTML editor, but I really do like it. I like the block-based coding. I like the live feature over here. And I think that's very applicable to a lot of curricular examples. The last thing we were going to do if we had time, but we don't, is I was going to give you guys some time to have just some play around time. And so these were some ideas of what you could do in that play around time, of some additional things you can use code for that actually tie into classroom standards, to core standards. Trivia game is another one that's very easy to adapt to any subject area. We didn't talk about the turtle program, but that is a drawing one. So anything with geometry is great there. And I think we are out of time. So I will stick around if the session doesn't automatically end. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Let me go back to our first slide that has our email addresses on it. So if you have any questions beyond, feel free to email us. I've seen several times the question of, is Edublox free? Yes, it is completely free. I have not found any paid features. Sarah, did you want to say anything?
I appreciate you, Jenna, for jumping in there and taking care of all of that. And if you guys have any questions about Edublox or anything that we can help with, just definitely reach out and email us, and we'll be happy to help.
I'm just going to jump in really quick. I wanted to just thank Jenna and Sarah for taking time to talk a little bit about computing across the curriculum using Edublox. And just to remind everyone that after this, we will be breaking for lunch. And there is a networking feature if you want to use it on Hopin that will pair you up with someone else. So that way you can meet other people that are attending the summit today. And we will return at 12:44 for the second raffle prize. So thank you, Sarah and Jenna, again. We appreciate you.
No problem. And I did see that, are there other Edublox lessons and resources you can point to besides the curriculum provided by Edublox? They do have it on their website. Let's go back to, go back to here. This showcase feature, where there are projects that other people have created, other students, other adults, who knows. Some of them are good, some of them are not good. So that can kind of give you some ideas. But I don't have a great source at this moment other than what's provided there. But that would be something great for me to kind of look at and see if we can find more stuff.
I did link a couple of things, and you'll see it under Teresa Benefield's name, of a couple of websites that I found just by just doing a little search just now. One is for Turtle, and the other is just a whole lot of Python resources, but it has lots of Edublocks different pieces on that as well. So those were just a couple I found just doing a quick little search of some extra things.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Dan Lowe, no, I do not. I do not know how many schools use Edublocks. It was introduced to us from Northwest Georgia RESA, where we taught that endorsement, and so we've been sharing it with our schools. But now I'm not sure. I'm not sure outside of that. All right, I'm going to go. So if you have any other questions, please send me an email.